Today on the Bourbon Bytes Podcast, we go over some of the biggest winners from the World Whiskies Awards of 2026, including a craft distillery that just won World's Best Bourbon. Plus, we have new whiskey releases from Michter's Penelope and Pinhook. Then I have a bite-sized review of the all-new Redbreast Moscatel Edition whiskey. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bourbon Bytes Podcast. I'm your host, Clifton, and this is the week of Thursday, February 19th, 2026. I hope you all had a wonderful Valentine's Day weekend. Myself and my partner took a trip to Temecula, California, and visited a couple of our favorite wineries down there, went to the casino, lost some money, and had a great steak dinner. So, overall, pretty solid, minus the losing money part. Today, I'm back with more whiskey news. Funny enough, the whiskey I'm reviewing this week, I actually talked about being announced last week, and I was very lucky to get my hands on it shortly after the announcement. Now, that's really rare for me in Southern California because usually with new releases, we don't really get them until much, much later, at least in terms of American whiskey. This one's actually an Irish whiskey, and we got it very, very quickly. So looking forward to getting into that bite-sized review later today. But for now, let's go ahead and talk about some of the biggest news that I need to share with you guys. I think one of the biggest stories to cover are the winners from the World Whiskies Awards. Now, I know you're probably thinking, what, another award ceremony? Why do we have so many of them? Well, I think a lot of it is marketing, but also as a consumer, I like to see which brands are showing up the most across these different award ceremonies so I can see kind of what's trending and seeing what I should try out next. Luckily, I saw a lot of my favorites on this list, as well as quite a few that I haven't tried yet. So I'm going to share a few of the highlights that I came across here, and I want to get your thoughts on how you feel about these winners. I think the reason I'm covering this story at all is the fact that the winner of the world's best bourbon actually went to New Riff. Now, if you don't know, I am a huge fan of New Riff. I've been following them kind of since they started, and seeing them win the world's best bourbon is pretty darn incredible. Now, this is for their flagship bottled in bond bourbon. They'd previously won other categories of awards, but nothing of this caliber. I'm going to have to pick up a bottle of that because I haven't bought standard New Riff in a while, even though I am a big fan of it, and give it another try because I know I've always loved it, but hearing the fact that it's won world's best bourbon just makes me excited for the brand. You know, I love cheering on the little guys out there. Not that New Riff is, the smallest distillery of them all, but it's definitely cool to see something like that win over, the big guys out there. Speaking of big guys, Heaven Hill actually came home with quite a few awards themselves. They were the Distillery of the Year, which, with them being one of my favorite distilleries, I'm pretty excited for. This is their third year in a row getting that distinction, so they must be doing something right. In addition to Distiller of the Year, they also got Sustainable Distillery of the Year, which is always good to see that category recognized in a ceremony like this. What I think is really interesting is the winner for Best American Rye Whiskey in the No Age Statement category went to Elijah Craig Toasted Rye. Now, if you watch my live streams on YouTube, we recently had a discussion about these Elijah Craig Toasted products and how they compare to the standard Elijah Craig products. I was a little surprised to see this. I do love a Elijah Craig rye. Personally, I think I prefer the standard Elijah Craig rye over the toasted rye, but that could just be personal preference. It is a relatively new release from them, and I love that they had the toasted barrel bourbon now at barrel strength. So maybe this means they'll start doing the toasted barrel rye at barrel strength. I might have newfound feelings for it if it's at cask strength, but yeah, congrats to them. In terms of other winners, there were some standard ones that you would expect to see on there. World's Best Small Batch Bourbon went to A.H. Taylor Small Batch. But they had a separate category for non-Kentucky Small Batch Bourbon, and that actually went to Wyoming Whiskey's Buffalo Bill Cody. Haven't had a chance to try that one, but congrats to them. World's Best Tennessee Whiskey went to none other than Jack Daniel's, particularly their 14-year-old whiskey, the batch one of that. I have had a chance to try that one, and it's an incredible pour. So I understand why that one won. That's very, very much well-deserved. Honestly, one of the best new releases out of Tennessee we've had in years. Now, they also announced World's Best Single Barrel Bourbon. So they have the best Kentucky single barrel being Elmer T. Lee, of course, from Buffalo Trace. But the best non-Kentucky single barrel bourbon went to the Presidential Dram 2-Term Bourbon. So I've had some releases from them. They do things like the presidential dram, the senator dram. They're all based on the length of time that a person serves in the government. Like I said, the two-termed bourbon is an 8-year-old bourbon. Haven't had a chance to try that one, but in general, I've quite liked their releases in the past. Now, world's best finished bourbon actually goes to Maker's Mark 46 for the Kentucky category, and the non-Kentucky category goes to Redemption Cognac Cask Finished. Maker's 46 has always been a favorite of mine. I always gravitate towards that or the cask strength Makers whenever I'm trying to recommend something for someone just getting into whiskey. I think Maker's 46 is a huge improvement over regular Maker's Mark, so makes sense to see that win here as well. The best non-Kentucky bourbon was 15 Stars Artisan Collection. I've not had anything from 15 Stars. I know Perry from This Is My Bourbon podcast has reviewed quite a lot of their products and seems to be a big fan. So I'm going to have to see about getting some of those and giving them a try because I hear about them a lot, just haven't had a chance to try them. Now, in terms of best single malt, there are quite a few categories just based on location. Best American single malt actually goes to Virginia Distilling Company, their Blue Ridge Toasted Barrel Finish. Now, funny enough, I actually reviewed this release on a live stream about 9 months ago when I was talking about some craft whiskey in America. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? So if you missed that, check it out. But it's cool to see a smaller distillery get that recognition. So in terms of Scotch, they had quite a few categories for best single malt. I'll just run down the list here. Best Campbelltown malt went to Glen Scotia 15. Best Highland malt went to Aberfeldy 21. Best Isla single malt went to Bowmore 21 year. Best Lowland single malt went to Inchdarney Distillery King Glassy Double Matured Fife Single Malt Scotch Whiskey 8 years old. I've heard of Inchdarney. I think I actually have had it in a blend before, either that or a Scotch Malt Whiskey Society release. It's one of the distilleries I had never heard of until the past year or so, but good to see them getting some recognition. And best Speyside single malt Scotch goes to the Glenlivet Founders Reserve. Now, there's categories of this for all over the world: German single malt, French single malt. I'm not going to go over the whole list. You can find them at worldwhiskiesawards.com. And last one I want to highlight is Best Blended Limited Release. There's quite a few of these, but for Scotland, it was Johnny Walker Autumn/Winter Blend, which I've not heard of that release. And Best American Blended Limited Release goes to Old Elk Cigar Punch Cut. So good to see a brand like Old Elk on here. I've had quite a few of their other releases and tend to enjoy them. So really cool to see a diverse lineup here of these winners. But yeah, that's just a little bit of highlights of those World Whiskies Awards. I just like seeing which whiskeys are worth picking up, whether they are the new guys or they are the long-standing favorites. It's always good to just keep an eye out on those and see how the world of whiskey is viewing some of your favorites. Or maybe your new favorites. Who knows? All right, well, we have 3 new whiskey releases I want to mention here today. The first of which is kind of big news. It is the new Michter's Celebration Sour Mash Whiskey. Now, this is only the 5th time they've ever released this, and there's only going to be 315 bottles of it available. It's a special blend crafted from just 7 barrels selected by their master distiller, Dan McKee, and their master maturation, Andrea Wilson, 4 of which are Kentucky straight rye barrels and 3 are Kentucky straight bourbon barrels. Now, as with these other releases, these are extremely rare. Retail on it is $6,000. But I know in the secondary market, you often see it go much, much higher than that. This is one of those ultra premium whiskeys that most of us will never see or even have a chance to try. But I do like mentioning them because it does show that there is a demand for these premium spirits in the American whiskey market. I'm reading an article and it says Celebration releases from 2013, 2016, 2019, and 2022 have reached upwards of $17,000 to $30,000 on the secondary market. So these are crazy rare. This release is coming in at 115.2 proof. And as far as I can tell, I'm not seeing any age statements on those barrels that were picked. Now, I assume they are going to be the best of the best that Michter's has to offer. I think if you're buying a $6,000 bottle of whiskey, you're leaving your trust up to those master distillers, master of maturation, to pick out the best of the best. In terms of flavor profile, they say it includes salted toffee, black cherry, and dark velvety chocolate ganache, which then transitions to citrus, floral, tea, and baking spices of the beautiful rise. This sounds incredible, don't get me wrong, but you will not see me buying a $6,000 bottle of whiskey here on the channel unless something amazing happens, like I get the dream job of a lifetime or win the lottery. Then maybe, but until then, you'll have to appreciate me reviewing whiskeys much more within my budget range. All right, well, less rare, but still an exciting release. There's a new release from Penelope, which is their 7-year-old cask strength bourbon. Now, Penelope is not new to barrel strength bourbons. They've been doing them at ages from 4 years old all the way up to 7 years old now. So this is the newest offering in this lineup. They say that they are committed to doing great barrel strength bourbon, and they're doing so without raising the price. So this is going to keep the same retail price as the previous releases that were a bit younger in age. It's going to be $60 per bottle. The mash bill is going to be 70% corn, 23% rye, 5% malted barley, and 2% malted rye. And as with other releases, it's going to be uncut and non-chill filtered and released at 115.2 proof. Now, I spoke on older Indiana bourbon in a recent podcast episode, I believe, but I'm loving to see that this whiskey is starting to become more available at older ages. I am such a fan of their flavor profile. I think we kind of got burnt out on the 5 and 6-year-old MGP over the past few years, but now from this, I'm seeing 7, 8, 9, 10 years old Indiana bourbon, and it gets me really excited for the bourbon market. I love that they're keeping it relatively decent price across the board, especially this new Penelope release. It just makes me excited for these older aged, previously unobtainable bottles to become regular additions to the shelf. So I'm going to have to keep an eye out for this one. If you guys want to hear my thoughts on it, let me know. I'm happy to reach out and see if I can get a sample to review here soon. Now, a similar note, Pinhook is releasing their 10-year-old rye whiskey. This is a continuation of their vertical series. Last year they had a 9-year-old. Before that they had an 8-year-old. So it kind of makes sense to follow with a 10-year-old release. Now, the 9-year release last year actually won a ton of awards. It won Rye of the Year at the Ascot Awards and Best American Rye Whiskey at the International Wine and Spirits Competition in 2025. So this 10-year expression is going to be a blend of 25 barrels bottled at 106 proof. And their co-founder and master distiller, Sean Josephs, says that reaching a 10-year age statement is a defining moment for the vertical series, and you can taste that evolution in the glass. Funny enough, this started as a 12-year project when the vertical series first came about, but now they've extended it to 16 years. So we're going to continue to see these age and come out with new releases every year. As a reminder, the mash bill of these is 95% rye, 5% malted barley. It is sourced from MGP in Indiana as well, but it has been aged at Castle and Key Distillery in Kentucky since the barrels were just 1 year old. Now, retail on this is $100 MSRP, and it's currently available by reservation only. It says that it's going to be released in mid-March. It looks like they're currently out of reservations as of today when I'm recording this podcast. But keep an eye out for that mid-March when it's actually released. There will probably be additional bottles available then. But if you want that, keep an eye on the Pinhook website and social media accounts and see if you can get a chance to grab it. All right, well, that does it for this week's whiskey news. Now it's time to get into our bite-sized review. All right. Well, like I said at the top of the podcast, I actually talked about this release last week. It was just announced, and I got lucky enough to buy a bottle. So I'm very excited to get into this new Redbreast Moscatel Wine Cask Edition. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know I'm a big fan of Redbreast. Just their lineup across the board is my favorite Irish whiskey, and especially in the premium price point. So I was very excited when they released this new part of their Iberian Cask series. In the past, they've done some PX Sherry, some Tawny Port, but this is a little bit of a different direction, Muscatel wine. I had to do a little bit of research on this because I'm familiar with the term, but actually was getting it confused with muscadine wine, which is popular in Southeast U.S. Muscatel is actually a Spanish wine, and it is a sweeter wine, kind of similar to PX Sherry in terms of sweetness level, but in a different direction of flavor. So it sounds like this is going to be more of a citrus, a bright, a honey sweetness, but still a very desserty finish on the classic shortbread notes that I love about Redbreast. In general, I've been a big fan of this series. I think the flavor notes from these wine casks really do complement the flavor profiles of Redbreast. I think one of the reasons I like Redbreast is it's a little bit less of that fruity sweetness that you see on other things like Green Spot or Yellow Spot. To me, Redbreast to me is all shortbread cookies, which I know is like a very generic descriptor for Irish whiskey, but this is the whiskey that made me realize that that's a tasting note that I love. So, of course, I'm going to get that on this bottle. So, I'm excited to see what that Muscatel cask brings to it. By the way, this is released at 92 proof, 46% ABV. Like other releases in the Iberian Cask series, there's no age statement on this release. We do know it followed its initial maturation that was in ex-American whiskey barrels and sherry casks, with 16 months in European oak hogsheads, which were previously seasoned for 2 years with Muscatel wine. So that doesn't really tell us too much about the age of the core whiskey here. I think that's kind of the one qualm I've kind of had with this series is I love Redbreast's core lineup, 12, 15, 18. I think they all have their rightful place on the market. And these are really fun releases, don't get me wrong. But I think the age statement kind of carries some weight to it, especially in the world of Irish whiskey. So having these not have an age statement does kind of make me a little bit worried that they're trying to cover up some cheaper whiskey with a really big, bold finish. So not to say that's what's happening here, but that's kind of the impression I've felt about this series in general and why I still typically gravitate towards the 12 and 15 year Redbreast, just personally. Now, in terms of pricing, like I said, I just picked this up this week. I paid $105 for this one, which comes in closer to what you would pay for like a Redbreast 12 cask strength. In my area, regular Redbreast 12 is $60, Redbreast 12 cask strength is $100, and then Redbreast 15 is $145. So this kind of leans towards the lower end of those, but still quite a bit more expensive than the regular Redbreast 12. And this, without an age statement, like I said, kind of goes to my point earlier. But that doesn't mean it's not going to be great. So let's go ahead and give this a nose. Sweet. Yeah, very different from just regular Redbreast. I finished off my bottle of Redbreast 12 probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I really have been itching to pick up a second one. So I was waiting to see if this filled the void for me, but this kind of is different, but still really, really interesting. It's still very clearly a Middleton product on the nose. It still has that same flavor profile of the shortbread, although it's quite a bit brighter and almost citrusy and like a honey. It's almost like a sweet honey glaze on top of a shortbread cookie. Not quite red fruits or anything like I've gotten on the PX cask releases, which I think is to be expected with the Muscatel casks. By the way, I want to give a huge shout out to a YouTube channel that I just discovered, Whiskey for Breakfast. He actually did a review of this a few days ago and got really down and dirty with the casks and the info behind them. So if you haven't checked him out, it's Whiskey for Breakfast, and the 4 is the number 4. He has just under 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So you guys go subscribe and let him know I sent you, because it was really informative and it really kind of helped understand what this whiskey was all about. But yeah, based on what he said, like the Muscatel wines are very much a honey, sweet, floral, bright note. And this is absolutely expressing itself on this whiskey. And like I said, citrus, but it's a very bright citrus, not quite orange zest, which is sometimes something I get on some other Irish whiskeys. This one almost goes into lemon, so it's more of a really bright, like almost like a lemon twist kind of note on it. It's really different and really unique. All right, well, with such a lovely nose, I bet there's a even better palate potentially to follow. So let's give it a taste. Cheers. Yeah, right on par with the nose. Still very honey forward. I mean, I love honey notes on a whiskey. Now, if you would ask me if I think this is a Redbreast product based on the palate, I would maybe hesitate just a little bit, because it does have with it a little bit of a grainy quality that I get from some of the lower end Middleton releases. I love my Jameson, don't get me wrong, but Jameson to me has a bit of a grain, a little bit of like an aluminum kind of taste on it. And I'm getting just a hint of that on this one. And I think that could just come from younger Irish whiskey in general. I've seen it on other brands as well, so it's not exclusively a Middleton note. But I think with age, usually that flavor gets covered up with just a really great dessertiness. But this one is a little bit bright, a little bit of that aluminum kind of lingering, but it is very well rounded out by that cask finish. It's equal parts fruity and toffee and dessert. I mean, it is a flavor punch in the mouth, but just very different than what standard Redbreast is to me. And like I said earlier, is this going to replace Redbreast 12 on the shelf for me for the time being? Not necessarily. I see a place for both of these bottles on my shelf. This when I'm wanting something a little bit more funky, a little more fun, and just something that I want to sit with for a while and kind of find those really nuanced, unique flavors. I see this having a spot, but I don't think it takes the place of my Redbreast 12 or even Redbreast 15 for that matter. Now, one area where I think this whiskey does excel is the finish. Man, oh man, for a 92 proof whiskey, 46% ABV, this has a long finish, and it finishes with the best parts of the whiskey. Not only are you getting that sweet honey, but you're getting a little bit more of the Irish whiskey character on the finish, those really rich cookie notes. This is the finish I expect from a Redbreast product, and I think it really does help round out some of the not so great points about the mid palate. Now, in terms of score, I do like to just give one score, considering all things like price, availability, nose, palate, finish, all things considered. I just like keeping it simple here on the Bourbon Bytes podcast. With that being said, I'm going to give this a 7.5 out of 10. It's a really fun new expression from Redbreast. I don't think it competes with some of my favorites like the 12 cask strength or even the PX Sherry cask, just because that's something that really hits all of the flavor notes that I want in a really good Irish whiskey. This one goes a little bit the other direction with those honey citrus notes, which are really fantastic. I do want to credit the fact that this is such a fun, unique finish. I just think, unfortunately, the lack of an age statement makes me think that there's probably some younger whiskey in here, which is contributing to a little bit of that aluminum, a little bit of like a tinny kind of note to it. Something that I don't usually find on Redbreast products, and even previous releases in the Iberian Cask series, they have such a rich red fruit note that I think it kind of counteracts it and kind of makes you not focus on that. But with this being a brighter citrusiness, you can still pick out some of those younger Irish whiskey notes, at least for me, on the palate. So those are the only thing holding it back a little bit. I think pricing is also a bit high, $105 for a non-age stated Irish whiskey, even though it is a really fun finish. I think that's quite a bit high and also what's holding it back from getting a higher score. But I still think this is a fantastic new addition to their Iberian Series lineup. If you are a fan of Redbreast and you like their more fun, funky cask finishes, check this one out. I don't think you'll be disappointed. I just would like to say try it before you buy it, especially if you're not familiar with the flavor that a Muscatel wine can bring to a whiskey. The only thing I can really compare it to is kind of some of the notes I've gotten on some Sauterne cask whiskeys. Although I don't know if I've had Sauterne cask Irish whiskey. I probably have. You guys will probably let me know before I do. By the way, if you guys ever have any feedback, you can join our Bourbon Bytes Whiskey and Gaming Lounge over on Discord. It's open to everyone. You can go to bourbonbytes.com, click the link there. Join us for all conversations around whiskey, video games, and everything under the sun. It's a great community of whiskey-loving friends, and I would love to have you there. But I'm always looking for suggestions for whiskeys to review for you guys. This one actually came up on a recent hangout over on Discord where I mentioned that this was available at my store, and quite a few of you told me to buy it because you really want to know my thoughts on it, so this is for you. Of course, you can always call in and leave a suggestion or a comment about the podcast. You can leave me a message at 916-642-9837 or 916-64-BYTES. I always love hearing from you guys. We've only really gotten a couple of these, so if you guys want to call in, please do. I would love to hear your voices, or you can also send a text, if you're not feeling so personal. But if you call in, I'll play it on the podcast. So if you want to hear your voice on it, hit me up. All right, well, that does it for this week. Thank you all again so much for listening. If you're not yet following me on your favorite podcast platform, please do. If you have a chance to review or leave a like on that platform, that helps out so much. There's a lot of whiskey podcasts out there, and it helps stand out from the crowd. So thank you for everyone who's left a review or a thumbs up. I'll be back next week with a brand new bite-sized review and more of the latest whiskey and video game news. Cheers. This has been Clifton, the Bourbon Bytes Podcast. I'll talk to you next week. Bye.